I learned the hard way that a little bit of power in the hands of the wrong person can be more destructive than a natural disaster. For 5 years, my life in Maple Creek Estates had been the suburban dream. Quiet streets, manicured lawns, and a general sense of leave me alone and I'll leave you alone that suited me perfectly. My name is Mark, and I'm a botanist. Not the university kind with a tweed jacket and elbow patches, but the kind who spends his days in controlled humidity, coaxing life out of some of the planet's rarest and most finicky plants. My specialty is orchids, specifically epiphytic species from remote cloud forests. They are my passion and my livelihood. I bought my house for one reason: the backyard. It was a perfect half-acre plot, flat and south-facing, ideal for the custom-built, climate-controlled greenhouse I had designed and erected myself. That greenhouse was my sanctuary and my laboratory, and it housed a collection I'd spent 15 years building, worth well over $200,000. The Homeowners Association was, for the first few years, a background hum. They collected dues, made sure the little park at the entrance was mowed, and sent out a cheerful newsletter twice a year. The board was made up of retirees who seemed more interested in the potluck that followed their quarterly meetings than in actual governance. My greenhouse, a significant structure, had been approved without a second glance. I submitted the plans, they stamped them, and that was that. Life was good. I kept to myself, my neighbors were pleasant, and my orchids thrived. Then Carol moved in. She arrived from some overly regulated gated community 2 towns over, and she brought its soul-crushing ethos with him. Carol was a woman who seemed to be perpetually wound a little too tight, with a sharp bird-like face and eyes that scanned every property for infractions. Within 6 months, she had campaigned her way onto the HOA board, promising to uphold standards and protect property values. A year later, she was president. The changes started small. A memo about all mailboxes needing to be the exact same shade of black. A new rule dictating that holiday decorations could only be displayed for a 14-day period. Garbage cans could no longer be visible from the street, even on trash day. People grumbled, but it was easier to comply than to fight. The fines for non-compliance were minor, but the notices were condescending and frequent. Carol had found her calling. She wasn't just enforcing rules, she was inventing new ones, each more arbitrary than the last. The cheerful newsletter was replaced by a monthly bulletin filled with thinly veiled threats and reminders of violations. The community's quiet harmony began to fray, replaced by an undercurrent of resentment and paranoia. My turn came on a Tuesday morning. I was in the greenhouse, misting a newly blooming Paphiopedilum rothschildianum, a magnificent slipper orchid with long, dramatic petals. A sharp rapping on my front door broke the humid silence. It was Carol, holding a clipboard like a weapon. "Good morning, Mark," she said, her voice devoid of any actual warmth. "I'm conducting a property review, and I need to talk to you about your structure." She gestured vaguely toward my greenhouse. "My greenhouse?" I asked, confused. "It was approved by the board 5 years ago. I have the paperwork." She gave a tight, dismissive smile. "That was the old board. The new board, under my leadership, has instituted a revised aesthetic code. That structure is classified as an unapproved outbuilding. It's not in harmony with the community's visual standards." I just stared at her, trying to process the sheer absurdity. The greenhouse was a professional, high-quality building, tucked away at the very back of my property, barely visible from the street. "Carol, it's a greenhouse. It's how I make my living. It was fully permitted and approved." "The new bylaws supersede all previous approvals," she chirped, as if reciting scripture. "You have 30 days to remove it." My jaw must have dropped. "Remove it? That's impossible. That's my entire business. My life's work is in there." Her eyes hardened. "The rules are the rules. If the structure is not removed within 30 days, we will begin issuing fines. $100 per day. After 90 days, the association will place a lien on your property for the outstanding amount, and we will explore our options for abatement." She tapped her clipboard with a perfectly manicured finger. "It's all in Section 9, Article 4 of the new bylaws. Have a wonderful day." She turned and marched back down my driveway, leaving me standing in stunned silence on my own doorstep. The first fine notice arrived like clockwork on day 31. I sent a certified letter back, including a copy of my original stamped approval from the previous board and a polite but firm explanation that their new, retroactive rule was legally unenforceable. The response came not from the board, but from an attorney. It was a terse, two-paragraph letter stating that the board had the full authority to amend its bylaws and that my non-compliance would be met with the full force of the association's legal power. The fines would continue to accrue. $100 a day. It was an insane amount of money, designed to bleed me dry. I started seeing Carol's handiwork elsewhere too. Mrs. Gable, an elderly widow down the street, received a violation notice for her small garden gnome, citing a new rule against yard statuary. Another neighbor was fined because his basketball hoop was, according to Carol, a quarter of an inch too close to the sidewalk. She was on a rampage, and the neighborhood was her kingdom. My neighbor, Arthur, a retired history professor who had lived in Maple Creek since it was built, came over one evening. He'd seen the certified letters going back and forth. "It's a classic case," he said, sipping the iced tea I offered him. "The petty tyrant. Give someone with a deep-seated sense of inadequacy a tiny sliver of power, and they'll wield it like a medieval king. She's not just enforcing rules, Mark. She's enjoying the power it gives her over people's lives." He was right. This wasn't about community standards. It was about control. The fines mounted. $2,000, $3,000, $5,000. I wasn't paying on principle, but the numbers on the violation notices were starting to feel heavy. Then came the letter I was dreading, a formal notice of intent to file a lien against my property. That crossed a line. This was no longer a dispute over bylaws. It was a direct threat to my home and my financial security. The next day, I was in the office of Mr. Davies, a lawyer who specialized in real estate and property disputes. He was a calm, methodical man who listened to my entire story without interruption, his fingers steepled under his chin. He reviewed my paperwork, the original approval, the new bylaws, the cascade of threatening letters. "Well," he said finally, "you're in a tough spot. HOAs have notoriously broad powers. A judge might see their new bylaw as legitimate, even if it's retroactively applied. Fighting this in court will be expensive and uphill." My heart sank. So I should just tear down my life's work? Davies shook his head slowly. "I didn't say that. I said it would be tough, not impossible. But a direct legal challenge is a frontal assault. It's costly and uncertain. There might be a better way." He leaned forward. "HOAs are corporations. They have to follow corporate rules. They must maintain records, hold open meetings, and manage their finances transparently. You, as a homeowner and member of the association, have a right to inspect those records, all of them." A new strategy began to form. Let's see how by-the-book President Carroll really is. We file a formal request for all meeting minutes, financial statements, contracts, and correspondence for the last 3 years. Let's go on a little fishing expedition. The request for records sent Carol into a fury. She stalled, claimed the request was overly broad, and had her lawyer send letters full of bluster. But Davies was relentless, citing state statutes that mandated access. Finally, begrudgingly, she complied. I was given a key to a storage closet in the community clubhouse. Inside were a dozen dusty, disorganized cardboard boxes. This was the complete, unvarnished history of the Maple Creek Estates HOA. For the next 2 weeks, I spent my evenings in that stuffy closet, surrounded by the smell of old paper, sifting through chaos. It was a tedious, frustrating process. Most of it was boring. Invoices for lawn care, minutes from sleepy old board meetings, angry letters about barking dogs. But I was looking for a crack in Carol's armor, any sign of impropriety, or a rule she herself had broken. I found minor things. A contract awarded to a landscaper who was a personal friend. A few questionable expense claims, but nothing that felt like a silver bullet. Then, in the bottom of a box labeled Archival, Plats and Surveys, I found it. It wasn't a document, it was a map. a large rolled-up survey plat of the entire development from its inception in the late 1970s. It was the original master plan, before the first foundation was poured. I unrolled it on the floor under the single buzzing fluorescent light. My own lot was clearly marked, number 42. I traced its boundaries with my finger, and then I saw it. My property line on this original official map was different from the one on the simplified plat the HOA used in its welcome packets. A small triangular sliver at the very back corner of my lot, a piece of land maybe 50 feet by 30 feet, was marked with a tiny, almost illegible annotation. It read, Parcel B, excluded from covenants and deed restrictions per county record 78-A432. My heart started pounding. I rushed home, pulled out my own property deed and survey from when I bought the house, and spread them out on my kitchen table next to a photo I'd taken of the old map. The discrepancy was there. The small triangle of land was mine, part of my deeded property, but according to that old note, it had been specifically excluded from the legal entity of the Maple Creek Estates HOA when it was formed. I immediately called Davies, my voice trembling with excitement. I think I found it. I explained what the map showed. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Mark, he said slowly, if this is what you think it is, if that parcel was legally carved out before the HOA was incorporated, then they have absolutely no jurisdiction over it. None. He paused, letting the implications sink in. Where exactly is your greenhouse located? I already knew the answer. I had paced it out a dozen times. The entire structure, I said, a slow grin spreading across my face, is sitting on Parcel B. Davies let out a low whistle. My God, she's been fining you, threatening you, and trying to place a lien on your house for a structure that isn't even on her turf. This discovery changed the entire game. We were no longer on the defensive, pleading for an exemption. We were now on the offensive, armed with the knowledge that Carol's entire campaign against me was built on a foundation of legal nothingness. Davies's advice was sharp and immediate. Don't tell her. Don't say a word. We let her continue. We let her dig this hole as deep as she possibly can. Every fine notice, every threat she makes from this point on is another nail in her coffin. So we waited. The fines climbed past $10,000. The lien was officially filed. I received a new, even more menacing letter from her lawyer, informing me that if I did not cure the violation by demolishing the greenhouse myself within 15 days, the association would exercise its right to abatement and hire a contractor to do it for me, billing the cost back to my property. It was the ultimate overreach, the final, arrogant move of a tyrant who believed her power was absolute. I had to attend a week-long botanical symposium in another state, a trip I had planned for months. I almost canceled, but Davies insisted I go. Let her do it, he said, a grim excitement in his voice. Let her commit felony criminal trespass and destruction of property. It's the best thing that could possibly happen to our case. Leaving was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I felt sick with anxiety, leaving my life's work vulnerable. But I trusted Davies. I set up security cameras, just in case, and left for the conference. On the third day, my phone rang. It was Arthur. His voice was frantic. Mark, you need to come home, now. She's done it. She's actually done it. There's a demolition crew in your backyard. The flight home was a blur of cold fury. I drove from the airport like a madman, my mind replaying a nightmare scenario of destruction. I pulled onto my street to find the grim reality was even worse than I had imagined. A small bulldozer was parked on the muddy tracks it had carved through my lawn. Where my beautiful state-of-the-art greenhouse once stood, there was now a twisted pile of shattered glass, bent aluminum framing, and crushed earth. And everywhere, strewn amongst the debris, were the broken, dying remnants of my orchids. My Rothschildianum, my rare ghost orchids. My entire collection, 15 years of painstaking cultivation, was reduced to garbage. The financial value was staggering, but the personal loss was incalculable. It felt like a part of me had been murdered. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. The news had ripped through the neighborhood. The demolition, a step so extreme and violent, had shattered the community's apathy. They were scared. If Carol could do this to me, what could she do to them over a garden gnome or a basketball hoop? The small clubhouse meeting room was packed. People were standing along the walls and spilling out into the hallway. It was the largest turnout anyone could remember. Carol sat at the head table, looking smug and triumphant. She opened the meeting by proudly announcing that the long-standing violation at Lot 42 had been successfully abated, restoring the visual harmony of the community. A few of her cronies on the board applauded weakly. The rest of the room was dead silent. Then I stood up. All eyes turned to me. I wasn't angry. I was cold. I calmly recounted the entire story, from the first visit with the clipboard to the mountain of fines to the lien. I described the value of what had been destroyed. I could see the shock and sympathy on my neighbors' faces. When I finished, Carol sniffed disdainfully. While the loss of your hobby is unfortunate, you were given ample warning. You chose to defy the rules of this community, and you have faced the consequences. That's where you're wrong, Carol. A new voice cut in. Mr. Davies stood up from the back of the room, holding a file. He walked to the front and stood beside me. My name is David Davies, and I am Mr. Miller's legal counsel. He turned to face the board and the assembled homeowners. You see, the board has been operating under a grave misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that has now exposed every single board member to massive personal civil and criminal liability. He unrolled a large, poster-sized copy of the original survey map and taped it to the wall for everyone to see. He used a laser pointer to circle the small triangular section at the back of my lot. This, he announced, his voice ringing through the silent room, is Parcel B. According to the original, legally filed plat map and the founding documents of this association, this parcel of land was explicitly and permanently excluded from the jurisdiction of the Maple Creek Estates HOA. A collective gasp went through the room. Davies continued, his tone like a judge delivering a verdict. That means the structure you have been fining my client for was never, at any point, on HOA property. Every fine you issued was fraudulent. The lien you filed was illegal. And on Tuesday morning, when you, President Carroll, authorized a demolition crew to enter that property, you did not perform an abatement. You committed felony criminal trespass, felony vandalism, and, since you used HOA funds to pay for this crime, felony embezzlement of association funds. Carol's face had gone from smug to chalk white. She started sputtering. That's not possible. The bylaws, the rules. Your rules end where my client's property line begins, Davies said, his voice dropping to an icy calm, and you crossed that line. We have already filed a civil suit against the association and against each of you, the board members, personally, for the full replacement value of the greenhouse and its contents, $200,000, plus punitive damages. Furthermore, we have turned over our evidence to the district attorney's office. I believe they will be very interested in your activities. The room erupted. The other board members looked at Carol with sheer terror in their eyes, realizing she had led them off a legal cliff. They started shouting over each other. I didn't know. She told us it was all legal. I voted against it. Her authority, once absolute, evaporated in an instant. She sat there, speechless and trembling, as her little empire crumbled around her. 2 days later, a detective from the county sheriff's office knocked on her door and arrested her. The legal fallout was swift and brutal. Faced with irrefutable evidence, the HOA's insurance carrier settled our civil suit immediately. They paid for the full value of the orchids and the greenhouse, plus a substantial amount for damages and legal fees. The other board members, to avoid personal bankruptcy, resigned in disgrace and contributed to the settlement out of their own pockets. The illegal lien was expunged from my record, and a formal public apology was issued by the now leaderless HOA. Carol's fate was more severe. The district attorney, seeing a clear-cut case of abuse of power and property destruction, threw the book at her. She was charged with multiple felonies. Her trial was short. The jury convicted her on all counts. She was sentenced to 2 years in state prison and ordered to pay significant restitution. Her reign as the Queen of Maple Creek was over. In the aftermath, the community came together to heal. The HOA was completely reformed. Arthur, my wise old neighbor, was elected as the new president, and he, along with a new board of reasonable people, systematically dismantled Carol's entire apparatus of petty tyranny. The absurd rules were purged from the bylaws, replaced by a simple set of guidelines based on common sense and mutual respect. The neighborhood started to feel like a neighborhood again. People put their garden gnomes back out. Kids left their basketball hoops up. A sense of peace and cooperation returned. A few years have passed since then. My new greenhouse is a marvel of technology, bigger and better than the one I lost. It's filled with light and life. I've slowly, painstakingly started to rebuild my collection. Some of the species I lost are irreplaceable, ghosts of a past I try not to dwell on. But new life is growing, and with it, a sense of renewal. The community is thriving, a testament to what can happen when good neighbors decide they've had enough. Property values, which had stagnated under Carol's oppressive regime, have actually climbed. I saw her once, about a year ago. I was in a grocery store in a town 30 miles away. She looked older, diminished. The sharp, aggressive certainty in her eyes was gone, replaced by a haunted, weary look. She was pushing a cart with a few generic items in it. Our eyes met for a fleeting second. I saw a flash of recognition, then shame. She quickly looked away and hurried down another aisle. There was no apology, no confrontation. There was nothing left to say. I didn't feel anger or even satisfaction. I just felt a quiet, detached pity for a woman whose need for control had cost her everything. The whole ordeal taught me a valuable lesson. It's not about bylaws or property lines. It's about the fact that unchecked power, even on the smallest scale, inevitably leads to corruption and cruelty. A homeowners association, a local committee, any small group, they can all become fiefdoms for bullies if good people stay silent. Standing up to Carol wasn't just about saving my greenhouse. It was about restoring the simple principle that a community should be a source of support, not a source of fear. It's about the right to be left alone to cultivate your own garden, whatever that garden may be. Now, when I walk into my greenhouse, the air is warm and humid, filled with the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. The quiet hum of the fans and the gentle drip of the misters are the only sounds. I can spend hours in here, lost in my work, the world outside fading away. The peace I feel is profound. It's the peace of a battle won, of justice served. It's the peace of a man left to tend his orchids in his own sanctuary, on his own land, finally and truly undisturbed.